Welcome, everyone. Oops, almost forgot to add myself. We've got no producer today, but we're going to move ahead and do Connect This because it is so important. And we are so excited to be here to share the news today and to just generally figure out what's going on in the world and teach Doug something. That's why we all get together every other Friday. He says he always learns something, so we're here to make sure he gets that through. But we do not have producer today. I'm going to be doing my best. And we'll see if you notice a difference. I think you will. Kim McKinley is here from TAC Broadband. Welcome, Kim.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Last time I brushed my hair, so this time I didn't brush my hair just for you guys.
It looks good. I mean, I think it looks great. Yeah. I assume it's very windy there right now.
Okay, moving on. Nice, Doug Dawson.
Yeah. No, when we make it awkward enough that you introduce the next panelist, that's the new game. Doug Dawson from CCG. Welcome.
Well, I learned something new today. That's the first time you've said the name of her company correctly. That's kind of new. But
I think it might
I'm
be
very
the second
excited.
time.
I'm very excited to be on a rudderless show here, so this will be interesting. Yes.
And then we've got Travis Carter from USI Fiber. Welcome.
Mr. Mitchell, I've never missed rye more than today. Huh? So. Well, interesting summer so far, right? I mean, rain. We finally are going to have a nice weekend. So I hope you get out. It's going to be 110 degrees outside. So yes.
Yeah, the low is 78, which I'm not a fan of lows that are close to 80. So it's going to be something.
Nice.
And then just in time, we have Shayna Englin, who is back on the show after, I don't know, but it's been a few months, I think. Shayna, welcome.
I feel like the last time I was on, I was told I was never going to be invited back because I convinced you were wrong and you had to say so on the air. So I appreciate being invited back.
Fortunately, my memory is just as good as my power of reasoning. So you're back.
I'm back.
And you're the 15th guest in a row who's proven them wrong. So
Yeah. Shane was only one episode where he was right. So just so you're clear, yeah. So.
Excellent.
So we have a full agenda. We're gonna have Shayna join us for the first segment, and then Shayna's gonna get on to do important work of I don't know, changing everything in California that's wrong. And we're gonna be talking for those of you who are kind of curious. We're not gonna touch on BEAD today, really. We're gonna do a little bit more on Wi-Fi 6, which is under threat, talking a little bit about some spectrum issues. And we're going to talk about a little outage that we had here in the Twin Cities. It might have been nationwide, but the impact that I felt here. We have some tech questions regarding some deep in the weeds technical stuff that we're going to talk about. And then there's a few short stories that we'll see if we can prolong them and make them painful for you. One is in Virginia, dealing with rights of way fees and railroads and whether they can be limited. Ohio has a pole replacement program we might be learning something from. And I want to know if anyone in this room has been paying attention to the EchoStar fight, because if I have to carry that conversation, it might just end early. I'm not really sure that I can do that.
I have, so yeah.
I was hoping you'd say that. So, but we're going to start, and I want to ask Shayna. Shayna, we have talked to you about a bunch of things that you've worked on in California, in which we're trying to make sure everyone has high quality access. They have like all of the things that they need to take advantage of modern technology. You've been working on a bill that is like the New York Affordable Broadband Act. There may be some differences you can share with us, but in general, the goal is to make sure that affordability is not a reason that people are not using the internet. So if you just want to give us some background first, and then we'll talk about the state of play right now.
Well, I think we now need to refer to this bill was a broadband affordability bill that did at one point intend to solve that affordability problem for at least some subset of California residents. So yeah, background is almost immediately after the Supreme Court declined to overturn the New York affordability policy, We had actually two members of the California legislature who were wanting to move a similar policy in California. One of them was the chair of the Communications and Conveyance Committee, so obviously kind of the right, most kind of powerful person really to move this policy. And so she introduced what really was kind of a spot bill. So it just said kind of the same thing, right? It said in California, providers will be required to offer a $15 a month, 120 plan to qualified California consumers. And that was it. And then the kind of next steps in the process are obviously to kind of flesh that out, figure out what it means to be qualified, figure out how that's going to work. If there's going to be limits in terms of the size of the provider, number of kind of what the limits are on what providers would be subject to that, et cetera, et cetera. So we've been in that process in as close a consultation as possible with the author for, I guess, going on 6 months now, 5 months. And where we are right now is the author has taken industry amendments, specifically cable industry amendments that make this bill now not even a broadband bill, and certainly not an affordability bill.
So this is a sort of thing that for Travis and other folks who aren't as familiar with the legislative process, I bet Shayna could list like 10 other times in which we've seen this scenario. But when I worked on issues around municipal preemption, we've seen areas in which you take a bill that you've advanced and you're like, we're going to remove barriers to municipal networks. And then a month later, you're telling everyone, please kill this bill because this bill is making life worse. It is not making it better. And so you're saying that that's where you are right now.
That's where we are, regrettably and extremely frustratingly. And I can't remember if this is a child-friendly show or not, so I won't curse. But there's been a lot of cursing.
What child
about where we are.
What child would watch the show, Shayna? Before you say anything,
you know what? A child I would really love to know.
There's Travis. Travis is still pretty naive here. So come on.
All right, I will keep the F-bombs to a minimum then, but there are many of them being dropped about where we're at on this bill right now.
So what specifically is the cable industry done to change the bill? The first thing you mentioned is that it is no longer a broadband bill because the kind of speed that would be required by this is now significantly below what the nation's definition is for broadband, as well as what's important to me is not just how the Federal Communications Commission defines broadband, but as Doug and others have documented, the fact that most cities, which means the vast majority of Americans who can get internet access are getting starter packages of multiple hundreds of megabits per second. So the cable industry first changed the speed requirement to what?
50/10.
50 megabits down, 10 megabits up.
Yes. So yes. Again, I'm trying to avoid the F-bombs, but yes. So got the standard, the speed standard to 50/10, removed any of the other service quality requirements or references from the bill. And the rationale for doing so was they did a device test in the author's office in the California Capitol, where they were able to connect 6 devices, it sounds like directly, to a modem offering 50/10. Don't know for how long those devices were connected. Don't know if they did anything on those devices. And then again, just clearly, it sounds like they may have actually been connected directly to the modem, and they certainly didn't have multiple wireless connections in multiple different units, which is kind of what that would look like for low-income communities in an old building in an area with kind of crappy infrastructure. So they found religion apparently on crowdsourced speed testing, but in this case, their religion is iffy.
What other changes have
question
they
their
made?
faith on that.
What other changes?
They gutted any enforcement, accountability, or reporting. So this was one of our concerns with the bill, and where we've been working with the author all along, is that it rather than put the program within the California Public Utilities Commission, which has a sort of staff and expertise in order to administer it and report on it, provide even transparency into how it's working. Instead, they had reporting going to the California Department of Technology, which again has no staff, no infrastructure, no expertise in doing anything like this. But they had initial reporting that at least was somewhat robust. It said you had annually providers had to report to CDT what plans they were offering, how many Californians were enrolled, how many had applied but were not enrolled, so we could get a sense of what that kind of enrollment process was looking like, and then how the plan situated, what were sort of the breadth of other plans that the providers were offering to all consumers. Now the bill has two pieces of reporting still to the CDT, which is what plan is it offering and how many people enrolled in it. It does not provide any authority or guidance to CDT to verify even that minimal information or to make that information public. And it now explicitly precludes the PUC or any other state agency from doing anything more than that.
Doug, did you want to ask anything?
Well, this has happened to every telecom bill in California for at least 15 years. So the rider. I mean, they've killed so much legislation. Yeah, they're very, very good at it. So, and obviously a couple of big ISPs have a whole bunch of legislators in their pocket. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Yeah.
I mean, this is the year. We're sort of joking. We have had some wins over the last few years. We're joking. This is our Empire Strikes Back era. Like, I feel like, and at least in my head, and maybe I'm just the only big nerd on this, but every time we see the legislators walk in the room, the like don 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 is playing in my head. As this is not the only bill that is. We now also have AT&T is riding herd over the legislature, and has, for reasons, again, I really cannot fathom beyond the obvious kind of craven ones, the AT&T bill to get out of their carrier of last resort obligations in California has become the single highest priority, apparently, for the speaker, because all kinds of rules and process are being waived in order to get this thing through. So we are in the Empire Strikes Back era of big telecom.
California is the only state that's really fighting them on tearing copper down. That's why they're doing it. So yeah. So.
Kim, were you gonna ask a question?
I was like, so I mean, we're saying that like this could be because of big telco, but you have to go back, and the legislator a few years ago was unanimous going forward with some of these other funding mechanisms. So has the legislator changed again, or what are we seeing in that realm in your opinion?
We have 40 new legislators in the California session, so it's a lot of new legislators. We're also in a complex political era. In California, it's always complex, but this year, given both the kind of massive amount of turnover in the legislature, we also have on the Senate side, a leader who is turned out. And so there's a leadership battle happening on the Senate side. And then, of course, like at the 2026 elections are already well underway here, and telecom is and has been for a very long time among the major, it's basically labor and telecom, the major political donors across the state. So there's that.
Well, as you can tell, for people who are watching live, Shayna's glitched twice, which is over a period of about 15 minutes is the average that I clock. We do a lot of work with people in Southern California. A lot of them are on charter because in LA, you actually have very few choices in a lot of neighborhoods. And we see that sort of like every 7-minute glitch from Charter Spectrum on every one of those calls.
Yes.
So obviously everything is going well and we don't need anything. Shayna, I think for me, let me put myself back up here for a second. For me, the thing that I feel like is the most concerning is the like no reporting one. Like I just feel like without some form of reporting, I would expect that it doesn't matter whatever the other rules are, because I would expect that the biggest ISPs for whom this matters the most will probably just do whatever they want to do and get away with it.
Yes. And in fact, we are seeing that to a certain extent in New York. So we, in an effort of good faith, assuming that the author and others were actually trying to do what they said they were trying to do here, we pulled together informational sessions with folks on the ground in New York who are trying to help eligible people sign up for the plan that they are theoretically entitled to. We talked to one case manager. She had 15 at the time that we talked to her. She was actively managing 15 cases where she was working with people who were absolutely eligible to try to get them signed up. And she had, over the course of 3 months, been able to successfully get one of her 15 actually enrolled. Because the providers, similarly in New York, the policy in New York did not direct how it was going to be implemented, and has very little in the way of remedy or recourse if it's abused. It has very little and kind of infrequent reporting and accountability. And so what you're seeing is that things, for example, like, and it is, of course, Charter Spectrum, so we know how this is going to roll out in LA if this goes through, where they have a requirement that you have to download a PDF that you have to fill out physically. You have to physically sign it, and you have to mail it with a copy of your qualifying documentation. So if you qualify because you're on SNAP, or you qualify because you're on Medi-Cal, et cetera, you have to make a copy of your qualifying documents and physically mail that information to Charter Spectrum and hope that it gets processed. So, for example, we had one, hope that it gets processed, hope that your, like, private information is treated with some level of dignity and respect. So like one of the cases that our case manager shared, again, with legislative staff in California, so they should know better, that she had she had a client who had printed out and done all of this 4 times.
Yeah.
And in her follow-up with Charter, either the phone number that they provided got to a customer service representative who had no idea what she was talking about, or who just said, "Oh, it must have gotten lost in the mail, send it again."
Yeah, no, I was thinking, since most of us don't have the photocopier sitting next to you on the desk, if you're going to be making copies of this stuff, I would make multiple copies to, maybe mail from different post offices at different times to try to maximize your chances that Charter would be able to go through it. This is
none of this is needed. There's a federal database that tells you who's qualified.
Also, we have a California program.
Anybody can use it.
We have a California program at the CPUC for Lifeline, where the same qualifying information is kept. Like, there are myriad other ways to do this, but obviously industry doesn't want any of those myriad other ways to do it, because then they might be accountable to it.
Right. Also, I'll just say, for those who design bills, this is one of the things that drives me crazy, as well as those who are then critical for why we have such specific legislation sometimes as to how a program must work with less flexibility. This is why, because when you allow flexibility, you have these big companies that then refuse to do it in good faith. And so then you have to get more specific and start prescribing exactly how to do something. And that sucks for those who might have a better way of doing it. And so it's kind of like a catch-22. But Travis, I want to make sure you have a chance to ask a question or make a point before we send Shayna back to work in the real world.
Well, maybe I'm the only confused one. So what they're offering is 50 by 10 for $15 a month. Is that what
That's
it is?
what would be required if the bill were to pass.
But how
just to qualified households.
Maybe this is just the practical operator in me. How can an operator afford to deliver a quality service with that little revenue? Is there some sort of government matching dollars or something?
Well, so all of these would be lifelines. So this again gets to another part of the policy that has been maddeningly frustrating to work on. Is look, in California, 97% of people who have a broadband subscription or who could get a broadband subscription get it through one of the 5 and soon to be 3 big ISPs that operate in the state. So of course, Charter and Cox are 2 of them. They're about to merge. That'll be 1. And Frontier and Verizon also merging. So that'll be 1 fewer. So there are 3 companies that basically split up the entirety of the California market. And there are, obviously myriad smaller ones, but that, they are the percentage of population that they serve and the percentage really of area that they serve is de minimis. And so the reality is that and again, what we had initially asked for was a kind of universal, like have a universal broadband affordable plan that is $120 for $30, which most of these companies actually offer in wealthier communities already. We know that most people will actually select a much higher cost and service plan. And then you get around any of the need to administer a program, you get around any of the administration costs, et cetera, and limit the requirement to the companies who have big enough service areas and big enough customer base that it is going to get spread out across that and is going to have de minimis impact on their profit margins coming out of the state.
Right. And so
this author hates municipal broadband. So there were a lot of permutations of like her trying to figure out how to exempt private but not municipal. And then there's a private provider that for whatever reason she doesn't like. And so tried to like draw the numbers so that it would exempt most of the sort of smaller providers, but not that one. Ended up, again, in a completely ridiculous space, which is that it exempts JPAs, so joint power authorities, which sort of gets at municipal, but doesn't actually do anything for any of the other small providers. So that is another area of the bill that we had been trying to work on with her that remains a mess.
So to answer Travis's question, Charter has a $30 product. This is nothing.
Yes.
The way the bill's written.
And
you just can't sign up for it anywhere on their network?
No, so it depends. This kind of goes back to I flashed back to 2022 when we had all of the kind of pricing disparity research, where what we found was that if you live, like again, sticking with LA, if you live in Beverly Hills, you absolutely can access. Actually, if you live in Beverly Hills, you are getting a $20 a month, 300 megabit per second offer. If you live in South LA, you get that same 300 megabit offer for $70 a month. And you're also offered 120 plan for, I think the last time we looked, it was 40. So yes, and the short answer to your question, Travis, is no, you can't. Not everybody can access it because it is not offered to everybody.
And it's not offered.
What we wanted to do, and we're working on this in terms of what we think states should do across the country from what we've seen in New York State. And we would kind of divide ISPs into 2 groups in terms of who we would target. There are larger ISPs for whom they've largely amortized the cost of their network, and they already have gear on the side of nearly every living unit in a metro area. And the cost for them to provide a low-income service is very low. Whereas you have in the other group, ISPs that are still growing, for whom there would need to be a significant capital outlay and a larger operating cost paid in order to connect low-income populations, and so we would exempt them. And in our preliminary studies, which we still plan to be able to publish at some point, we found that in most states you can get at nearly everyone if you just focus on the biggest providers. So Travis, if you were to like double in size and double in size and double in size and double in size, you might get close to where you would start to be caught up in this. But until then, as you were growing, you would not be encumbered. It would be focused on the bigger providers. And then separately, I think there are analyses being done that will show, as Shayna said, that it is de minimis, that based on the revenues that they have in these states, if you do some basic assumptions, you find that their ability to, or they're requiring them to suddenly offer this plan to everyone rather than just the affluent markets where they face competition, would change their revenues on a yearly basis by well less than 1%, very small numbers.
Again,
In fact, the CPUC did that analysis.
So I'm totally confused, right? So I just picked 5 addresses in Compton, California. I don't know LA. I've just always heard that's not the ideal area, and they all have 100 megabit for $30.
Yeah.
So
on what? On Charter? On
on Charter Spectrum. So I'm confused. What? So they don't offer it universally across their network.
Well, no,
They actually even offer it universally in Compton.
If you come back 3 months, and if you come back 3 months later, that may not be there anymore. It comes and it goes.
Right.
It's really weird in California.
Have we ever seen any patterns like from your studying it, Doug?
At the point where they did the big study, it honestly looked like they used early AI to target one street at a time. It was like one block at a price. I mean, it was block at a time, and there's no way a person was doing that. It was like airport. It was like airport.
Well, Doug, do you think they have different DOCSIS plants in different parts of the neighborhood?
No. Well,
that would
slightly, but not to any drastic.
I'm sure they have
one giant head end. Yeah.
There've been multiple large scale. UC Santa Barbara did a study of, I think it was 55,000 addresses across LA County. And again, found there are patterns, right? Like generally in lower income census tracts. And so think about how small a census tract is in a place as big as LA County. But in lower income census tracts, they were more likely to have a higher price for the basic service than in higher income census tracts. And that was true across 55,000 addresses randomly selected. And then when you went and kind of dig down into the map, it is, again, because this is how kind of wealth and poverty is distributed, it really, there were differences street by street.
The other issue, Travis, is these are special prices, and after a year, they go up to $80 or $90. So.
Oh no, that I get. But I think this was a qualification thing. It would just seem to be very difficult that somebody would sit there and go, this street has it, this street doesn't, if it's technology agnostic across the neighborhood.
Yeah, but this is where one of the things that I would throw out there, and we have to draw this to a close, is we assume that the people who are doing the marketing are good at their jobs in figuring out these prices. And I think that when you look at companies like Charter, that is not always the correct assumption. I think it's possible that they are in themselves engaging in tests, and then they're trying to figure out like some sort of holy grail of like how to maximize revenue. So that might be a part of it. But I also just don't think these people are necessarily very good at their jobs. Any last comments, Travis?
No, I was just curious. I'm just practical how it actually works. If I have no data other than 10 addresses I queried for 2 minutes. So
yeah, Doug.
Well, the last thought, Travis, is if you've ever been to LA, it goes rich neighborhood, poor neighborhood, rich neighborhood. I mean, just back to back to back to back to each other. They are all definitely in the same head end. There's no question about it. So, yeah.
Okay.
Kim.
Okay.
I'm just here for the show.
She's just bringing her awesome glasses game, and that's what she's doing. There it is.
Yeah, what else I can say about this topic. I think we've talked about it. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see if we've seen more competition, not maybe in some of these urban centers, but as some of these guys, as Doug has made out to be in some of his last posts, is that the big guys are going to have to focus on some of the urban centers to get more market share. that do they start looking at this problem differently to really gain some of the market share they're losing right now? I mean, I think it's interesting to get the data, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how everybody responds to everything. Because I don't think you can play the same game and like that they've played for, or people have played for years.
I agree. That's a good point. Yeah.
Shayna, any last
I
thoughts
have to get to
before we
my
cut you loose?
11:30. No, just thank you. Always happy to come on and chat with y'all and feel reminded that I need to go get some better glasses for video. So thank you for that, Kim.
You're welcome.
When you come back next time, could you please correct Chris? You didn't do that today.
I gave her no opportunities.
I didn't know I was coming on until too late to have that opportunity prepared.
That's right. If you want to catch Chris, you got to come with a plan. That's right. Great to see you, Shayna.
All right. Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you. So I guess we can't put anyone over there. Okay. I'm just gonna see if there we go. That was an interesting bug. We've got a peekaboo, and I'm gonna throw that in here, and we'll see what we get here. Oops. This is I'm just trying to show
Chris,
value.
You can do it, Chris. We'll give you some.
I want to show you that Rye and Jordan provide a lot of value to what we do here. So this was shared by Doug. This is not where you usually see the cabinet.
Okay,
I see Travis immediately turns his head.
Doug, that is awesome. Where'd you find that?
Someone here in North Carolina said to me, it's a pedestal up in the air.
That is awesome.
And we're all trying to figure
What
out
is
what it's for.
Yeah, why do they have this pedestal?
The best I could figure out, my best guess is they needed a quick fix, and there's actually a little panel inside a pedestal where you can splice fibers easy, and they did that temporarily. But
I think it's waterproofing.
Well, it makes no sense because this thing is good. Whoever the pole under is going to be really not happy because that adds a lot of wind resistance to that pole. So that's crazy.
Right. Yeah. My thought is there's a relocation project happening at that intersection.
It's just temporary up in the air. Yeah.
It's temporary because I'm looking at it's basically large zip ties holding it up there.
Yeah.
And I'm not proud to say we've done kind of some things a little similar to this during relocation projects. Because you don't
this wasn't really from Minnesota.
Yeah, and any provider that says they haven't done something hoopty like this is lying. But no, I'm going to guess that there's a recon project in this underneath. But the problem with these recon projects is sometimes they can take a year or more. So that old pedestal might sit up there for a year. But hell, it's safer up there than on the ground. So
that's for sure. Yeah.
But that's a first. I never thought
first time I've never seen it before. Yeah.
So. Doug, will you check to see from that person if they have any sense of how long it was out there, and if it's still there?
I'll see. Yeah, I'll see. Yep.
All right. So yesterday there was a, I guess, nationwide outage with DNS with CenturyLink. Maybe the first hint of it was that I'm on the Quantum Fiber from CenturyLink Lumen, and my neighbors started texting me, being like, "Hey, we're having problems. Are you?" And I was like, "No, everything's fine." And so, I've was sort of half thinking about that, and well, now Ruben is asking it was DNS. I assume that's what it was. I didn't dig into it too much. I was going back and forth with Travis a little bit about it because there was something else that was happening, which was that I just found the Verizon mobile network was a dog. And what I think happened was that enough people jumped over to mobile because they were not having luck with their wired connection, that I could basically not use the Verizon wireless connection. And it's a reminder that mobile wireless isn't magic and that there are a lot of problems to overloading it. So I wasn't sure if any of you had tracked what had happened yesterday or had any reaction.
I just looked on Down Detector, and they had CenturyLink had a DNS problem yesterday, and it peaked at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
And it was all even 6 and 9 o'clock.
I would like to retell the story, though. Chris texts me at 7:05 Central, says, is there a Quantum Fiber? 7:06, I say DNS issue. There was no debate, Chris. I'm just kidding. And
I mean, in my head, I was like,
yeah.
yeah, no.
Absolutely.
It took me a long time to sort of to put it together, because I was like, oh, maybe there was like a fiber cut somewhere that like impacted multiple carriers, and that's why there was slowing down. But at the same time, like I was sort of separately thinking that Verizon was having an issue and CenturyLink was having an issue, and the CenturyLink issue might be DNS, but maybe there was something else going on. And then I was just thinking, no, it must be congestion from all of the people ditching the CenturyLink connection and jumping on the mobile network and saturating it.
Well, remember, we've talked for 116 episodes where if you have a fiber network, it takes all the heavy load.
Yep.
Now what you saw here is a high percentage of the fiber network is offline, so the wireless network cannot handle the traffic.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kim.
I was just going to ask you, is this all because you sold your Lumen stock a while back, and like this is the repercussions?
Oh no, I bought DNS stock because I think resolution is just going to keep going through the roof. So I loaded up on DNS stock. I don't know why there was a DNS problem.
He'll be getting a bill from AT&T not too long from now. So yeah.
Doug,
they bought his property. They bought him. They bought Chris. That's probably why they bought it. So. Yeah.
What a poor design to have DNS centrally located for the whole country. I mean, I'm not sure.
And I've been writing about that for years. With all these data centers, I would bet CenturyLink has 3 data centers for the whole country. That's exactly what they do. And so you lose a huge chunk of the country with one problem.
Yeah, I mean, so Travis's first advice to me was that I should switch to, well, he suggested Cloudflare and Google, which funny enough are the ones that I use. I used to do the quad 9s, but I did that, and that's why I didn't have any problems. I think anyone that's reliant on an ISP for DNS is probably doing something a little bit foolish. So I talked to my neighbors about it, but then at the same time, like, I don't want to change their configurations, because if something else goes wrong, they're gonna it's on me then trying to figure it out, right? So want to talk about Wi-Fi 6 being threatened. So Congress wants to pull in some revenue. And so when they reauthorize the FCC Spectrum Authority, they want, or Auction Authority for Spectrum, they want to require the FCC to auction off some spectrum to pull in some Benjamins for the Treasury. And there's been a debate over where to go, because there's not a lot of stuff left. I did a Community Broadband Bits episode this week that we just released that talks about this in depth with Harold Feld from Public Knowledge and Michael Calabrese from New America's OTI, Open Technology Initiative Institute. And basically, long story short, Wi-Fi 6 is in danger because the House came down with a reasonable approach, which left some flexibility for the FCC, but made sure they did not have an incentive to auction off CBRS or the Wi-Fi 6 spectrum, where Ted Cruz immediately came in, and the Senate right now is figuring out its path for passing this bill. And Ted Cruz basically wants to ensure that Wi-Fi 6 is taken. Oddly enough, Ted Cruz's approach will result in less money for Treasury, but will almost certainly raid a part of Wi-Fi 6, which sucks. But there is an effort right now from Public Knowledge and others to get people to understand what's going on and reach out to their representatives. So, Doug,
Travis, do you want to correct him, or should I?
What? Yeah, go ahead. But I don't
which one of you wants to come back?
It has nothing to do with Wi-Fi 6. It's 6 gigahertz.
Yeah, no, it's 6 gigahertz, but it's the Wi-Fi.
That's not why. No, it's not Wi-Fi 6.
It's the future path for. Oh, sorry. It's the path for Wi-Fi 7 and future 320 gigahertz blocks of spectrum to be able to do very large transfers in the home. Right.
But the problem is it's 6 gigahertz, and there's a giant chunk of that that's used for Wi-Fi, and they want to rate it. I mean, that's what.
Right. So you're just trying to nail me on a technicality, but you're not saying that it's wrong to be concerned about what's going on in DC to pull the spectrum out.
He said you were wrong. He did solidly say you were wrong, Chris.
Yeah, I did. No, unfortunately,
I'm not going to tolerate that. I don't have a reason to defend me.
I know we don't have politics here, but right now DC is transactional, and so the carriers are bribing enough people that cell carriers want to get a whole big chunk of spectrum when no one's looking here. And so that's what's going on. And will they pull it off? I don't know, because there's more money for the economy to keep that as Wi-Fi than there is to take it to the cell carriers.
Right.
So,
and Senator Ted Cruz is from the great state of Texas, which has AT&T, who's been pushing to use this as an opportunity to get more spectrum. Travis, any thoughts on you've been the biggest cheerleader for the 6 gigahertz being open to Wi-Fi, both for, I presume, internal reasons, but also, internal to the home reasons, as well as because the wireless ISPs are thrilled about the 6 gigahertz to be able to use that.
No, I'm not a big fan of taking any of it back, but we can see what happened in 900 megahertz, 2, 4, 5, and how much innovation and how many people are actually connected. But then again, I'm just thinking of the practical argument. Is their argument, again, I'm not a fan of, I'd keep it all, but are they basically saying that the Wi-Fi to cellular usage is imbalanced and we need more outdoor spectrum for cellular use than we do for Wi-Fi? Because 320 megahertz, I didn't want to correct Chris, but anyways, 320 megahertz of spectrum.
That's a gigahertz? Sorry about that.
It is a tremendous amount. So if they take 320, it still leaves a ton of spectrum. So I would say that if they need more spectrum, sure, but give us more power in the spectrum that they leave behind so that we can do a lot more good with the open airwaves.
And then meanwhile, they also want to raid a bunch of other pieces of spectrum. They're going after a bunch of stuff the military has. They're going after parts of CBRS. They want to go through all the middle spectrum and just grab everything. The second this administration was elected, the carriers came up with this plan. So, yeah.
Chris, you learned why yesterday. That's why.
Sorry, what was that, Travis?
You learned why yesterday when you tried to use Verizon.
The question is, I feel like when we revisit this show in 7 years, Travis, and you're talking about how there's so much in 6 gigahertz, it doesn't matter if we
you're going to watch this show again in 7 years and have a conversation about it.
I remember every moment to be able to go back in 7 years.
Continue on.
To me, that sounds like a comment that's much like the famous Bill Gates and 640K of RAM. Yes, it does seem like a lot of traffic right now, and it probably is a lot. It will be a lot to reserve for in-home usage. But if you're in a school, a factory, a business, a hospital, a variety of other places, I think they're going to be using that 6 gigahertz pretty quick. And so I don't know that I would be so quick to say it's not that big of a deal to hand it over to AT&T. And frankly, the Verizon issue was a complication of the fact that Verizon already sucks in St. Paul because they've refused to make the investments that would make it better. We've talked about this in the past. Doug's talked about it, and I don't know if you want to respond to this directly, but they can use their spectrum much more efficiently. The only solution is not to tell AT&T, here's more of this precious resource, good luck.
We're all going to sit here and stare at you now.
I'm not ranting today. My throat won't take it. I'm barely holding it together as it is.
Chris, don't get me wrong. I first said I'm not a fan. I'd like to leave the entire 6 gigahertz spectrum available for public use. But I'm just trying to understand is it purely fiscal, or are you seeing?
It's not. It's not.
It's AT&T. This is what Doug was being nice about it. AT&T is writing checks to the federal government, and elected representatives like Ted Cruz are saying, "Yes, give me your money, and I will get you this thing back." There's not an argument that's really happening on this. This is pure power politics of AT&T trying to make sure that it is increasing its value by hoarding more spectrum and making these changes. This is not
here's the fiscal issue, Travis. The current budget says they will raise $88 billion through these auctions. All the auctions we've ever had since they've been auctioning only come up to $60 billion. There's no chance in the world they're going to actually get that much money.
Sorry, Doug. My understanding is that all the auctions together are on the order of $250 billion.
Oh, no, it is. You're right, but it is. But still, this would be a third of that. It's just never going to do it. So they end up holding the auction. They raise $25 billion, and they go, "Oh, geez, we fell short of our goal." It's not a fiscal issue. this is a one-time chance through politics to grab spectrum. So, yep. Because once you grab it, they never have to give it back. They'll keep it forever.
Yeah, but they're not going to. They don't. These are very smart people. They're not going to spend a bunch of money just to sit on it. They're basically saying, in order to, they can go to the legislature or the politicians and say, look what happens when there's a major fiber outage. People do not have internet access. Chris,
you say that, but Verizon has a bunch of 12 gigahertz and 20 gigahertz they bought. They don't hardly use it all. So,
well, yeah, but
that's just it. I mean, I feel like, Travis, you're right that they're very smart people, but I think you're wrong about understanding the financial games that they play and the role in which the whole role of foreclosure and the idea that the fact that they have it and no one else has it provides more value to them, even if they don't put it into productive use, which has been one of the major issues that the policymakers that are actually serious about stuff in DC have been trying to figure out, is how do you auction spectrum off and then require it to actually be used proactively?
No, but so Doug, the 12 and the 24 gigahertz, they don't propagate.
No, they don't do crap.
Yeah. People are so used to using their handheld device everywhere and anywhere, and there's only so much spectrum that actually works.
Well, and they're only using a fraction of what they own even now, because they can't afford to put the complicated antennas in the phones that get 30 different spectrums. So, I mean, that is the problem. Yeah.
So we had a question from Ruben, and we're going to come off this for a second just to make sure we hit the other topics. But Travis, do you know offhand? I know that Tirana puts out CBRS gear. Some of the tribes that we've worked with use Tirana's CBRS stuff. Most of Tirana, I'm guessing, does not use CBRS, right? Do you know what spectrum that they do their most power, most of their work in?
Well, I know when they were getting all the press, it was in 5 gigahertz, and now they've got some 6 gigahertz. Radios, but again, they're only using 320 megahertz of the spectrum. So they're again, I'm not saying give them the spectrum. I'm just saying they're only using a small piece of it.
Okay, so this would, it would potentially hurt them, but we would not really notice. I feel like the real danger of this, in my mind, aside from just the corruption of it, in the process as I've seen it develop, is that we won't know what we missed. It's the classic sort of issue of, like Travis said, 2.4, 5 gigahertz. Whenever we've reserved spectrum for the public usage in this unlicensed approach, it has returned tremendous benefits to technology, to innovation, to people. And if we then try to sell off a bigger portion of that, I think it's going to be much worse for us, even if in the short term it generates some cash. So the last thing I did want to share,
Wi-Fi is trillions of dollars of benefit to the public. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, and you're not making that up. Like, it's literally trillions of dollars. Like, the estimate is that it's like approaching $1 trillion per year right now of economic benefit to the economy. The thing is that this discussion should be happening at the Federal Communications Commission. Much as I might be frustrated about how it would go down there, this should not be decided in a Senate budget
Congress.
bill. No, that's ridiculous. So this should be sent to the Federal Communications Commission to decide how to figure out how to auction stuff off. But the other piece of it is, and this should concern you as well, Travis, I would think, is that the FCC, when it gets auction authority, is directed on how to prioritize it. And historically, the FCC was supposed to balance multiple interests, including various perceived public interests, as well as the value to the Treasury and things like that. Now, my understanding is it's being told solely to prioritize value to the Treasury and not the long-term benefit of various considerations. And so that will also change how the FCC evaluates its future uses that we should all be concerned with.
Yeah, and in the past, they actually did a pretty good job. Spectrum is really complicated. There's hundreds of different users, so it's really not easy to balance. But they've done not a bad job. So
don't roll something where we get credit for something, Chris. At the bottom.
Well, it was mostly Chairman Rosenworcel who did the best. But I just say that for Chris's benefit.
Well, here's what I find ironic, though, in this whole conversation. They want to go after the 6 gigahertz spectrum when the U.S. government and military own the vast majority of the spectrum below 6 gigahertz. So why don't they just give up something they have?
Well, they are taking a bunch of that in this bill. This bill does take a bunch.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
Yeah, no. So Travis, the issue is that for basically the FCC is going to have to auction off like let's just say, I don't know if it's exactly 10% of this, and the question is whether it gets credit for auctioning off like little bits that are in the public interest, arguably. And the House said basically, if the FCC chooses to auction that, fine, but it doesn't count toward the value that the FCC has to auction in total. And so it would have discouraged the FCC from auctioning off parts of the 6 gigahertz band. Senator Cruz came forward and said, you should probably auction off the 6 gigahertz band. And that is the change that drives a lot of us crazy, because we think the FCC should decide, in part because we really hope the FCC won't touch that 6 gigahertz band. But there is other stuff that will certainly be auctioned within that space. And the Department of Defense then is really fighting over that as well.
No, they rolled over. They rolled over a month ago.
So I don't understand the full politics of it, but we don't have time to get into it right now. But Doug says they rolled over. I can't argue with him.
The military rolled over and said they can have whatever they want. We'll figure it out, because that's the new military.
Okay. I mean, I heard that.
Hang on. Just one final thought. Maybe it's a 6 gigahertz spectrum easier to go after, because the really good spectrum below 3,700 megahertz, 60% of that's owned by the federal government. Why don't we reclaim some of that? Fine, that's my last.
Yeah, I think we're gonna move on. Okay, why? What do you do when at the home? And so there's a question about whether this might be different for passive optical networks versus Ethernet networks, active Ethernet. Travis, I want to go to you first on this, and then I'm curious if Kim has a perhaps a different reaction from Utopia days, and I guess you still know a bit about the technology, even though you're focused on construction now. No, you're not gonna.
I know about everything.
Know about everything.
Just keep going. Let's keep
All
going.
right, so you have a customer, and that customer is at the same speed for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Do you have to upgrade electronics to that customer? Like, what changes with that person not wanting to get a new speed package or something like that?
Well, I mean, technically you wouldn't have to, but in ye olden days, the play for GPON providers was to end of life their hardware. And if you were a large operator, they tended to like to stay within manufacturers' warranties. So you would naturally over, in a 5 to 7 year cycle, age that equipment out. Now, if you're in an open architecture, you could run it for 10, 15, 20 years. How often do you change the Ethernet switch in your basement, Chris?
Every time it gets wet.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
So manufacturer warranty, that's really helpful. And that would be the same then. That same philosophy wouldn't matter on the tech.
No,
the tech can run forever. Yeah.
No, so I think, like the part of the problem back in my olden days, as you would call it, Mr. Mitchell, is that there was tech that was still out there on the Utopia network that we were begging people to call in so we could go in and replace their equipment, but it wouldn't break. And it was old 100 meg equipment. And we wanted to get in there and have like a gig to 10 gig enabled devices. But when that 100 meg equipment doesn't break, you have to keep reaching out to them and saying, please, we'll give you speed upgrades. And a lot of them didn't even care because they just were like, it's an inconvenience. If it's working, keep it in the house kind of thing.
Doug, you were going to say something?
Yeah, it's really the difference between physical obsolescence, where it wears out, and it's good. Most of this stuff is good for anywhere from 10 to 20 years anymore. But
way to use a big word.
It's the vendor. It's the vendor obsolescence. When the vendor stops supporting it, it's not so much the warranty ends. They stop making any new ones. You can't get replacement parts. And then people start thinking about replacing it. So,
I would say it is a vendor game, right? Because if the vendor is not supporting you, then how do you...
So now you're taking a big risk, and it's not so much the units at the house. When they don't support your core stuff anymore, you can't really take the risk of keeping it. So, yeah.
Okay. And what do you do? Do you suspend their service to get them? What do you do to get into some of these homes? Like on the Utopia network, you're inside.
I have ISPs to do that. I have ISPs who would knock them out of service and go, I'll be right out there.
Our policy was six months of notifying you we needed to replace. The jump from 100 megabit to gigabit was the most challenging. And if after 6 months, if you didn't answer, we just unplugged you, and it's amazing how quick we were able to fix it.
Right.
Okay,
so he's one of those ISPs.
You have to. Yeah, you have to.
Another question that we had, was from the Calic show, and in that there was a question about because we talked about different split ratios, and with the upcoming gear, you could do more splits. Do splits change latency?
I mean, technically, yes, but
Not practically.
not that you would even hardly be able to measure.
Do you want to share a little bit about why that is? Like,
Well, it's all TDD, time division multiplexing networks, which could be wireless, Starlink, or hell, even old T1s and stuff. Every user gets their time slot. So that in theory, the more users you have, the less time slots you have in the same microsecond. But it's so minuscule; it'd be very hard to even measure it.
okay.
Yeah.
And then there was a question about what splits would make sense. And so if you have Travis, we were talking at the time about a 50 gigabit connection on a passive optical network. You said specifically put a 50 gig on a 32 split and I'll be retired before that's a capacity issue. So I'm okay with that. Would you split a 50 down further as you're looking now at like considering future builds in other places with different technologies?
So our model right now is a 1x32. I think financially it makes the most sense for the OLTs. But it also makes the most sense operationally if you have an outage or you need a resplice. Right. The advantage you have with Active E is you take one customer down. If you have to do a resplice or if you have light issues, in theory, you have to take 32 down, and the more you split, the more that becomes a customer service issue than it does anything else. But there's also a big misunderstanding, I think, with people with splitters. These are just prisms. They're not smart. It's not tied to a speed. It's not tied to a QAM rate. It's not tied to anything.
Right. There's no CPU that's like doing something.
And literally a splitter, they cost like $9. I mean, we're not talking a really sophisticated piece here. So, you can run GPON, XGS-PON, 25 GPON, 50 GPON. So if I said something like that, it probably just simply means I'll be retired when 100 GPON's getting deployed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you open that thing up and see what's in it, it's like nothing.
Now the vendors are telling you even on a 20 gig PON, and you can do 256 customers. And the issue is when you have a problem, you don't want to knock that many people down at once. So that
you don't want to really, and then you have a light issue too.
And I hate to tell you that the people who are using that are some of these fly-by-night vendor capitalist finance ISPs are going to the big splits because they save money, but it's a much more dangerous network in the long run. So,
right. So what you're saying, Travis, I've shared this with other people too. I mean, you've regarding your philosophy that right now the bottom line depends on having a good rating among Yelp and Google and places like that. And so if you're making decisions that if you have a problem and you're taking out 256 customers rather than one for a finicky optic or something like that, then you're making a terrible decision from your business perspective because of the rating that you're going to be suffering if you have that small outage, right?
Similar to putting all your DNS in one location. No, because literally
remember they're still burning Travis and Effigy, so
from that 3 a.m.
outage. From that 3 a.m. outage. Yeah.
How do you do maintenance on your network, Travis? Like if everybody can't be without internet for 3 minutes.
Chris, you're not wrong. People get so focused on the tech and how much the tech costs and how we can whittle every nickel out of it. But your customer service rating, I mean, when you wake up in the morning after that little outage yesterday and there's 125 new orders for service, that's how finicky customers are. Right.
Do you think that's market by market, or do you think that's all over the place?
I think it's a philosophy. I really do. I mean, if the best networks are the ones that can keep their customers.
Kim, did you see the study that just came out from FBA about the interviews with different people about how they viewed fiber and finding that the millennials,
documentary,
the younger folks, it was
it's
it
out there.
Younger people are much more concerned with getting fiber than like older adults.
In my experience, at least when I was at an ISP, I think that what I saw was it was more based on education levels, more than age levels. That you saw that you had an uptick in higher, affluent, highly educated people for fiber more than you did with some of the other ones, younger people, because I think it's more of a, do you even know what the difference in fiber is versus
Okay.
like,
I want to,
yeah.
I do want to jump back to one last technical question that came in live. And so I'm curious if Doug, since I gave Travis the other two first, what causes the differences in latency among different providers who might in the marketplace appear to be using broadly similar technologies for access?
It's not the technology, it's the entire network. I mean, the guy with the longer latency has probably got his switch, 3 towns over. So it's the combination of his entire network. It's not just what happens between your house and the closest point. It's the whole darn network of getting to the internet. So some of these guys have very complicated, old, rusty, backbone networks, and that's their big downfall. So, and if you go, and he used TDS as the slower one, but you might go to another town that TDS has, and it could be even faster. So it just depends on the local situation. So
I have a question for you, Doug. Are you seeing like the new communities you're working with, like really concerned about the architecture when they're building out their business plans for it right now? The network architecture.
no.
Mm.
Unfortunately, new ISPs just think fiber is great and they don't ask a lot of questions. I hate to say that. Travis learned the hard way by doing it, and they don't ask the questions they would have asked 10 years ago. So.
All right, as we were wrapping up, I'm going to save the Virginia right-of-way and railroads question for the next show, I think. Ohio has a pole replacement. You really want to talk about that?
Oh, yeah. No, I have a permitting panel at BBC. So if you want to learn about that before the next show, you should come to Broadband Communities next week in Houston. See? There was my plug. There was my plug. Now keep going.
Do you want to talk about it briefly?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be talking about the challenges in permitting on the panel, and we have people representing who are attorneys, we have people who are ISPs, engineering firms, and so it's going to be a unique perspective. So come join us on Tuesday in the afternoon, I think 3:50. Don't look at an agenda and not ask me. But now off to wherever we are now.
All right, so Ohio has a pole replacement program, and I will admit I came into this with a bias of being concerned that we would see that this was a state program that would be used almost entirely by Charter Spectrum. Lo and behold, I was wrong. So I proved myself wrong today. I get points and I lose points today. So it was pretty well mixed from what we could tell. Doug, I think you wrote about this, might have even been, or maybe you didn't write about this, but what are your thoughts on the replacement pole program in Ohio?
I'm always mixed on every pole replacement because to some degree it lets the electric companies off the hook for not doing a good job. They're supposed to pay for their darn pole replacements and put it on the electric rate base. So, so bailing them out for their worst poles. But the flip side is, in all the cases in that article, these were where fiber networks were being built, and without that, it would have been too costly to build them. So yeah, I think it's a necessary evil. I think that if that's what it takes to not have a year delay to get a fiber network built, then I guess it's all right. So
was that like the purpose of it though, Doug? Because that's what I was wondering by reading the article.
This particular one has to be related to very specific fiber projects versus some of the other states. They could come in and ask just for any pole to be replaced, and that's where all the money went to Charter, right? So, so here it's very much specific to something being built for fiber in the home. So. And that's why you see it spread out so much. I would imagine those other ISPs had equally sized projects to Charter's fiber to the home, is my guess. So, yeah.
Right, and that's one of the things you said, Doug. I would put a little emphasis on, which is that if a state's looking for how to try to get some benefits, the benefits to a community, to the economy of moving up a fiber completion network date by a year are significant and probably much greater than the cost of the pole replacements. And so having a fund like this seems like a fairly reasonable thing, although I suspect that the thing to do would be to like make sure that, and I don't know how Ohio's pole replacement program was conceived, but would probably be to make sure that like there's still some sort of penalty for a utility that has not properly maintained its poles.
If I was designing that program, I would say that the power utility had to pay back half of what I gave the ISP or something. Yeah, but so there should be a penalty.
Yeah, perhaps not even like upfront, but some sort of like overtime.
Or even over time.
Yeah.
Hey, stop saying what I say. Don't do that.
I don't know. Maybe when I'm a little bit lightheaded from not sleeping and being ill all week, I'm more agreeable. Travis really liked when I was reflecting back to him what I learned from him, and now you apparently like that, Doug. So this is a whole new approach I can have.
With the last got me.
It's the agreeable. No, you lost her right at the beginning. You attacked her before we barely got the show.
Well, Kim and I are mortal enemies. We just we're conciliatory in the show.
Ooh, we got our college word today. I gotta look that one up.
You might want to use some AI. I'm not sure I pronounced all of the sibilants in it. So, Doug, do you want to just briefly give us a sense of what's happening with EchoStar and the Federal Communications Commission and why that matters to anyone?
Well, it matters. EchoStar is the official company, but the cellular company is Boost Broadband. So they are supposedly the fourth national cellular company, and they were created. They were created back as a result of T-Mobile buying out Sprint.
Can I interrupt you for a second? I just wanted to say, for people who want this, like, I don't know, I should do the work of going back and like finding the like 4 or 5 best Nilay Patel rants on this. Cause on the Verge podcast, every now and then he goes into a rant about the absurdity about them being the fourth carrier and how nobody can actually buy a phone or get service from them. And it's quite entertaining.
Well, that's where I was going, because that's the problem. So they only have 9 million customers. It's kind of hard to call that nationwide, and only 1 million of those are on their actual network. So they've not done a very good job, but they have activated 40,000 towers or something. I mean, they're getting there. And the last FCC gave them a
year. Doug, 40,000 towers? Is that a lot? I mean, that's a lot. It is a lot. Okay, I could be wrong. It struck me as a lot.
The last FCC gave them a year delay to get more of their work done. So one of their spectrum licenses was coming due, and the new FCC is considering just putting them out of business. I think obviously this sounds like another transactional thing to me, where the big guys just would like to be rid of them. My personal bet. But they are making
they would do either.
Well, they have not, but they've made great progress in their network. Actually, like in New York City, they have the fastest network in New York City right now. So they are making progress in some places. So, but this FCC could, if they didn't renew their license, they'd be done. They're out of business. So yeah.
But the reason I wanted to bring it up is that the thing that I find interesting, and this is a part of an issue with CBRS, is that like, it feels to me like historically, this could be a naive claim. Every now and then I've been accused of being naive. But it seems to me that historically the FCC has not generally threatened to rapidly and arbitrarily change or revoke the license. No. In fact, I think there's laws.
They've never done it.
And so this would be huge. I mean, we are seeing a significant potential change of the FCC threatening what previously had been, a safe investment.
Which makes everybody worry about their license now. If you get on the wrong political side of the FCC, boom, out you go. The other part of this battle that's interesting, a big chunk of the spectrum they own, Starlink wants it. So that makes it even more of an intrigue here. So,
yeah, I was wondering if that would made Travis having more of an opinion on it. Travis, have you tracked this at all in terms of your interest with Starlink?
No, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I know that you make it a big priority to say that one of the things that Starlink needs and that would help rural America would be making sure that they have more spectrum. And so, I am curious about if you have any reactions to the effort of like potentially, going after the EchoStar spectrum in order to try to make it more available for Starlink or other LEOs.
I think I've come up with my new position is take back some of the 60% the federal government has. Leave everybody else alone. Give it to everybody to use, and put it to work, because it's all silent right now.
Yeah, and I'd add to that to say all these fights are only about urban areas. They don't use any of this stuff anywhere else.
Exactly.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Well, to me, that seems like as we're wrapping the show here. So, producer, get ready. The the benefits of CBRS are that we have seen that it works to do spectrum sharing, to have a big database and to track this and to make it work. The problem with CBRS is that it's too small. And to me, it seems like taking more of that government spectrum and making it available to share would be a very smart step moving forward, right?
Love it. Love it. Way to go, Mitchell.
I especially liked how Chris is now, he's not agreeing with the moderator. This is wonderful with the engineer too. So.
I mean, I'm just a real fan of putting spectrum to use. Having spectrum sit idle, it's a shame. Yeah. And especially, I mean, we talk about 6 gigahertz. 6 gigahertz, okay, but 2,900 gigahertz, that's really good. Right. You know, they're not all gigahertz are the same, Mr. Mitchell.
When you say 2,900, you mean 2.9?
Yeah, 2.9. Sorry, 2,900 megahertz. Yeah.
No, I'm sure that people who are like, track this stuff more closely know that, but I just want to make sure that, because 29 gigahertz is, I'm guessing, quite poor for propagation, right?
Very poor. Yeah.
But it'll drill a hole through your head. So.
Oh yeah. Oh no, you can move a lot of bits if you can see each other. Yeah.
I feel like this show is digressing very quickly right now.
Kim, would you like to produce it?
No.
Next show. Let her produce the next show. Yeah.
So in 2 weeks, it's the 4th of July. Quick poll: should we delay a week or should we go on Thursday before the day off? Probably a lot of people are thinking Thursday. Kim, you want to do it Thursday?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Why not?
Sold.
All right, we'll be looking at the Thursday show, and now I won't take a vacation.
I got to wash my red, white, and blue Grateful Dead shirt now.
I'm ready. I got to go buy some new clothes or something. I'll be ready for it.
Oh, yes, this will be a fun one. This will be one for the ages, one that we'll revisit in 7 years. So, with that, I want to thank you all for your patience in this poorly produced but highly entertaining episode of Connect This.